So, good afternoon, listeners of the Vital Signs podcast. I'm Dr. Andrew Greenland, and I'm very pleased today to introduce Lauren Chiren to the podcast. Lauren is a founder and CEO of Women of a Certain Age. This is an organization dedicated to supporting individuals and organizations through menopause and related transitions. So this is incredibly important topic medically, but also the sort of wider social implications of the menopause. And I'm hoping we're going to learn a little bit about what Lauren does and perhaps some information that will help women out in the big wide world challenge it with this challenging issue. So Lauren, perhaps you could start by giving us a little bit about your journey, how you've arrived at this from being a senior executive in the financial services to where you are now.
Yeah, it's really interesting because Women of a Certain Stage was never intended to be a business. It was something that has evolved as a result of me leaving my job in my early 40s, thinking I had early onset dementia. I had been headhunted twice. I had global teams running complex business critical transformation projects and programs with teams in America and India and the UK, often getting 3 days out of one by chasing the sun with the different time zones. And I loved it. I really, really thrived in my work. And then I find myself sitting in meetings where I'd maybe be in a room of 18 people in a board meeting. We're all vying for our voices to be heard. I'd be the only female, and I would be sitting there. My throat would be so tight with anxiety. I'd have to sip hot water to be able to give myself a moment and relax my muscles enough to be able to speak the smallest of sentences. Or other meetings where I was holding onto the arms of a chair and I would be watching the clock ticking down because my heart would be beating out of my chest and I was having palpitations, things I'd never experienced before. And different things were happening. I wasn't sleeping. I've never really needed a lot of sleep, but I was down to less than 2 hours a night. And that was on a good night. Some nights I didn't sleep at all. So after about 18 months, I got to the point where after I drove home from work from Swindon to Bristol, I got in the house, I said hi to everyone. Apparently, I turned around to pick up my bags to go back to work. I'd completely forgotten the fact that I'd been at work that day. And when the person looking after my son at that time said to me, "Hey, where are you going?" And it dawned on me, that was a moment where I thought something is seriously wrong. And I left my job. So it was 3 months later, my doctor very quickly, very correctly identified that I was postmenopausal. I'd probably become menopausal at 37 when I had my son. And I didn't realize because I had fed him for a year and then I was on contraception that meant I didn't have a breakthrough bleed. So it was on the symptom profile that he identified it. And I was just so relieved to find out that I was menopausal and it wasn't anything more sinister that I realized I needed to use my background in human performance, which is the other part of my background, to help other people learn about what menopause was. And that was where it all started.
Amazing. You really sparked my interest because I have a massive interest in dementia. And obviously you had this concern that you thought, oh my God, this is early onset dementia. What sort of proportion of women notice this as like one of the first presenting symptoms, as it were, of the menopause? Because I guess it's not necessarily that common to have the cognitive signs earlier on.
I think it's an interesting question about what stages the different symptoms kick in at. And obviously everyone's experience through menopause is quite unique, but the most commonly discussed symptoms are the brain fog, the anxiety, the low mood, the hot flushes, the night sweats, and the sleeplessness. And yet we know that sleeplessness is probably one of the top symptoms. About 81% of people who were surveyed as part of the government survey a couple of years ago declared sleeplessness as one of their biggest symptoms. But in terms of the profile, in terms of at what stage does each one kick in, different surveys are throwing up different data at the moment, and we still need better information about everything to do with menopause.
Interesting. So your personal experience has led you towards developing this organization. Can you tell us a little bit about what it is, what it does, what it stands for, who it's really trying to help? It'd be really interesting to hear.
Yeah, I mean, when my doctors, I literally, the first time I saw my doctor, he said, low mood, you need to start looking after yourself. You're a new parent, you're working full time, you're a sole parent, you need to start looking after yourself. You need a network around you. And I was like, no, I'm everyone else's rock. And the second time I went to see him, he did some bloods. And I thought that was to figure out just how bad was this dementia and how long did I have that I would be able to make competent decisions. So when I went back for my bloods in the third appointment and he said it was just menopause, I literally punched the air with joy, and I was the happiest menopausal woman in the whole of the UK. I mean, not many people are delighted to find out that they're menopausal, right? But I was over the moon. The very thing that I wanted to do, I mean, my background, psychology, mental health, anatomy and physiology, nutrition, personal training, all many things to do with human performance. And I was utterly clueless. I didn't even know the word endocrinology, let alone any words like perimenopause or anything else. So I literally started just bringing people together to talk about it and creating small groups of women at that time, just to talk about their experience, find out what was going on with them, what challenges were they having. And then that led to me starting to work with some organizations. And the question from the companies was, what would you like your employer to have done that would have stopped you from leaving or provided the help and support you needed? And that was the beginning of me starting to work with large corporate organizations around the UK and then now across the world, looking at policy, procedure, strategy, training, toolkits, but everything really from job design and person spec all the way through the recruitment and onboarding process all the way through to exit. And then what metrics people are gathering, how we can understand what people need, how we can put that in place, building design even, simple things like having, we want to make sure that we have toilet cubicles with toilets and wash hand basins in the one space, so someone doesn't have to go into a cubicle and then come out and get freshened up if they've had a heavy bleed or they've had some urinary leakage. So we're trying to make every aspect of the workplace more tolerable for someone going through menopause. We also run an academy to train people to become menopause coaches, champions and mentors. And the thing I really love doing is training people to be menopause coaches, because the more people we can get out into the world to do this work, we can put a stop to this needless suffering that so many people are going through as a result of the lack of knowledge.
Amazing. So I think probably most people on this call have heard the terms menopause and perimenopause, but perhaps some people don't necessarily have a very clear definition of what it is in scientific terms, or even how you help people to understand the definition of menopause and perimenopause. What's the way you explain it to people?
I think bearing in mind that, yeah, of course. And bearing in mind, I'm working with a lay audience. So the simplest terms are that, we talk about it being the end of our reproductive life and we're no longer having a monthly cycle. So we know that when we have our last bleed that we're technically menopausal, but because we don't know it's our last bleed, we wait for 12 months. And then once we've gone 12 months without a bleed, we say we are menopausal, and then we're postmenopausal for the rest of our lives. But the perimenopause phase is a little bit less clear for a lot of people. So many people will be on contraception that will mask what their natural bleed would be. And we need to educate people a lot earlier. So perimenopause is when the estrogen levels are beginning to decline, progesterone levels are beginning to decline in the body, and a small drop off in testosterone perhaps as well. But the estrogen levels are declining at a very erratic rate, whereas progesterone levels are coming down more steadily. And eventually when we stop having that last cycle, and we are probably going to find that periods are getting closer together than further apart. We might notice that they're becoming heavier and then they might get lighter, and things like more premenstrual syndrome type symptoms. So the headaches, the backache, the joint pain, the mood swings, the changes to sleep, all of these things beginning to kick in during that perimenopause phase. And then postmenopausally, as our bodies are adjusting to the new levels of estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, most people start to settle back down. The average age in the UK, it's about 51. So anywhere between 45 and 55 is considered normal, which means that if someone becomes menopausal at 45, their bleed stopped at 44, and they've probably been perimenopausal from their late 30s, early 40s, and that would be considered completely normal. And I think that's the thing that often people say to me, oh, that early? And I'm like, potentially, yes. So under 40 is premature. Menopause between 40 and 45 is considered early. And obviously there's interventions that may be required as a result of losing that estrogen to our bodies earlier on, because it's got so many functions.
Absolutely. Thank you. What are some of the common misconceptions about menopause that you're seeing in your work? Because I guess there's a fair few out there. What's the kind of common mistakes and misunderstandings that people have?
I think that's an interesting question at the moment. So I just started my new menopause coach cohort last week, and I discovered in the group of people that we're training at the moment that their base knowledge was actually a lot higher than it was in previous years, and quite markedly so. So I think we're seeing a big shift. I think it's that it happens to older women, that it's something that happens late in life, that it's at the end of your life. And that's probably the biggest misconception, or that it's just hot flushes and period stopping. You know, I definitely grew up thinking it was just hot flushes and period stopping. I didn't know that it was such a massive life transformation. And the other misconception for me is the fact that I think it's a celebration. I think it's an amazing opportunity. When you're at that point, halfway through your adult life, you become menopausal. You've got the whole other half of your adult life to go, and you've got all this skills, knowledge, and experience that you've gathered up until this point. So I think the misconception is that you're old, you're over the hill, you're past it. It's just hot flushes and, you know, your period stopping, when actually it's this incredible opportunity to not have to worry about your monthly cycle anymore. There's so many positives of being postmenopausal, and the opportunities, literally, if you've got the right mindset and you're looking after yourself, can literally open up. And that's the biggest thing for me.
I think that's wonderful. That's such a really good reframe, because I think if you, all the negative reasons that you said, that people kind of look at this as a negative event, and then you're basically opening up this whole other chunk of your life. I think it's a really important reframe. I guess that's something that your coaching program is really kind of promoting with your coaches and working with people to kind of get that shift in mindset.
Yeah, well, the actual diploma itself kicks off with health and hormones. So we're looking at menstruation through menopause, and we have medical experts that are involved in that as well, and Macmillan nurses and University College London professors, and lots of amazing brains delivering on that. Then we deliver coaching and listening skills, but the core program we're teaching people to deliver, the first session is all about mindset. Because if we don't get the mindset right, then actually I'm not sure how I would, you know, teach people to work with people going through menopause. So it all starts with mindset, recognizing your value, your position, how amazing you are, and the opportunities that you've got ahead. So yes, 100%, totally agree. It all kicks off with mindset.
And how does the program progress? So mindset is the first stage. What are the other elements to the program? And also, what kind of people are interested in getting involved in doing this kind of work?
Yeah, well, the diploma is 18 weeks, and 7 of those weeks is the actual coaching program that we're teaching people with all the scripts and everything. So we look at mindset, and then we look at hydration. You know, we're made up of a lot of water, and our body systems don't work well when we're dehydrated, and least of all when we're going through menopause and having hot flushes and night sweats. So mindset, hydration. Then we look at nutrition. So we invite people, we build this up over time, but we invite people to think about finding 7 days in their diary where they can be in control of what they're eating and drinking. And if they can eliminate or reduce as far as possible caffeine, alcohol, refined sugars, red meat, and just eat as naturally as possible. So if it's fruit and veg and pulses, just anything, we've got loads of recipes as well. So just to eat naturally for 7 days, give the body a break, you know, give the body a bit of a holiday from all the stuff we shove into it that we don't really need, and give people that experiential opportunity to see what they feel like after 7 days of eating like that, see what their sleep's like, what their joints feel like, their bloating feels like. And then we get them to gradually introduce things, and we get them to journal and experience what that feels like, so they can identify what's working well for them and what's not. And I find that's for me, that's a much more powerful way for people to have that lived experience of what works for them. And then we look at movement, activity. We've got to make sure we're keeping our bones and joints strong, get our cardiovascular health. We want to engage, so we want community. We're looking at how to people make sure they've got that healthy adult interaction with other people, so we're not listening to too many of the stories we've got going around our head. Giving back, really important that people are giving back and volunteering. And a big component, especially for women going through menopause and other people going through menopause, is the asking for help and support and receiving help and support, because we're notoriously bad at helping everyone else, but not actually doing it for ourselves. And when we put those 7 steps together, we find that people's rest and relaxation, their ability to switch off, their ability to engage, their ability to sleep all improves. And that's a core component. To the other part of your question, in terms of who does this, oh my gosh, we have doctors and nurses come through the program. We have therapists, we have HR directors, HR people. We have people who are in corporate, but actually thinking about their next stage. Maybe they've had a bad experience through menopause and they're thinking about making sure other people don't have that. We have people who have been stay-at-home mums. The children are now gone off to university or left home, and they've now got time and they want to do something different. And we get coaches, we get personal trainers. We have the most incredible array of people from every continent that comes through the program. So it's such a joy, and the community aspect of it is just incredible. I love it.
Amazing. It sounds very holistic, and that's my kind of language, because I work very holistically and integratively. So I'm very interested to hear that you're looking at the dietary, the lifestyle aspects, the psyche, and everything that plays into this. And obviously having an 18-week program gives you the kind of the opportunity to cover all those areas in some detail, which is amazing. So are the coaches working one-to-one with women in this position, or how does it actually get delivered?
Yeah, I think
they've done their
so.
training and they've become accredited or whatever, in terms of working with people who want the support, how does it kind of pan out?
Yeah, when they've completed their diploma program, they have another year's worth of ongoing community support and training. So they're being kept up to date. That's very important for me as well. So they have ongoing training. And so we support them to think about who's their ideal client, what's their personality like, how do they want to take this work into the world? So for some people, that will be one-to-one or group coaching. For others, it might be running workshops or delivering talks. So my goal is to empower people to have the knowledge to take this into the world in a way that they can attract the people that's the best fit for them, because we all attract different people. And, you know, with 1.2 billion people going to be in menopause by 2030, I definitely can't reach them all. So I want to try and train as many people as possible and support them after the diploma over that next year to find their people and support them to deliver the work in the way that is best and fit for purpose for them going forward.
It's very, very interesting. And what about organizations? I mean, how can organizations benefit from implementing menopause-inclusive policies? Because I mean, this is what some of the work that you do, and I just wondered how this work that you do pans out in the kind of employment situation.
Well, I think that, you know, I didn't realize I was a statistic. So when I left my job as a result of not being supported through menopause, there are numbers of different models out there, but CIPD and Bupa did some modelling that showed that somewhere in the region of 300 to 330,000 people leave the workplace every year as a result of not getting the right support through menopause. There's something like 14 million days lost to the economy, again, for the same thing, costing the economy somewhere between 10.5 to 11.5 billion pounds for a variety of reasons, either long-term sick, short-term absences, or people leaving. So we know that businesses' bottom line is being hit by people not being present and not performing whilst they're going through this time of life, when the reality is menopause is definitely going to happen, but the suffering is optional. So if we can then get employers to look at their demographics, look at their people, I normally work with organizations looking at their strategic plans and think, well, you want X number of women on your board or in senior leadership. You've got health and wellbeing targets. You've got diversity and inclusion targets. If you're supporting people going through menopause and people managing people going through menopause and people being managed by people going through menopause, actually the world becomes a lot better for all of those people. So we look at policies, guidance documents. We look to see what's the best fit based on their culture. We then look at what is their level of knowledge, how can we expand that knowledge, and we have a number of modalities that we do that through. We will do line management training, which is usually soft skills training, because we can do the teaching menopause quite quickly, but we need to empower people. We need to make sure that people feel comfortable intervening and having those conversations in a safe, psychologically safe way. And then it's about looking at their employee assistance program, their private medical, looking at all the other support mechanisms they've got, and making sure the providers are actually providing proper, qualified menopause services, because we've discovered that that's not always the case. So there's lots of things that they can do, but the quickest, easiest thing is just set up a menopause social event on repeat. So once a month, once every 2 months, allow women to come together, allow people to come and explore menopause, share what's working, share where the good sources of, trusted sources of information are, because there's a lot of misinformation out there. And I know that isolation, that loneliness, you're hiding in plain sight when you're going through menopause. And the mental health side of it is just not discussed. Even now, after 11 years of doing this work, the mental health side of menopause is still not discussed properly. And too many people, we know there's a spike in suicide and suicide ideation. So it's so important that people have got that connection and that they're actually talking and they've got that place to go where they feel safe and can have those conversations.
I mean, do employers get it? Are employers generally receptive? I suppose the larger organizations perhaps more so, but what about the smaller employers? Are they kind of on board with this thing?
Yeah, it's such a good point, isn't it? Because coming from a large corporate background, I defaulted to working with the banks, the building societies, the oil and gas, construction, lots of very male-dominated organizations, because that's my background. And then someone said to me one day, "Why are you not working with smaller organizations?" And I was like, "Well, because they don't have enough people for this to be an issue." And someone actually held the mirror up to me very quickly and said, if you've got a small organization with maybe 150, 250 people, and you've got 2 or 3 key women that leave, that leaves a gaping great big hole in skills, knowledge, and experience in that organization. So of course they're going to be interested. So, and the new government in the UK has made a commitment that any organisations with over 250 people now will have to have a menopause action plan. So there are changes afoot to help encourage employers to make some changes.
Good. That sounds very promising. So there might be some people listening on this call who are maybe at the first inkling that they are going through the menopause, starting the menopause. What would be your sort of top advice for people navigating the menopause based on your journey? And this is both professionally and personally.
I think from a personal point of view, I'm very mindful that every person's journey through menopause is unique. And so therefore what I did or what worked for me is right for me, but not necessarily the next person. But I do think get knowledgeable about menopause, make sure you learn about what it is, start looking after yourself. There's nothing you can do better than recognizing menopause is going to come, but you have got a lot of control of what your experience through it's going to be. So start increasing your hydration level, making sure you're moving your body more, speaking to people, actually talking to other people, making sure you realize you're not alone, you're not isolated. Go and speak to your doctor, take a symptoms list. You can download the green climacteric scale and fill that in, or go on to different apps and just keep a journal of your symptoms, because that gives you a document to have a meaningful conversation with your doctor, with your partner, with your line manager. And then you can sit there and say, well, look, I think this is menopause, these are my symptoms. And you can start looking at what your options are at work, with your doctor, at home, and start to have those conversations, educate the people around you, because they're going to be experiencing your changes as well. So let's do this journey together, and don't try and go it alone, because you're not alone and you deserve to have that help and support around you.
Amazing. Thank you. There might be some corporate people listening to this call, or some employers from smaller companies, perhaps below the 250 employee threshold. What can colleagues and managers do to support their colleagues going through the menopause if they're in an organization which is not really large enough for a formal action plan? What can they do at a more sort of basic level to help their colleagues?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, that every time you take on a new piece of work, every time you bring someone new into the business, every time you're doing something that is just a on repeat type of action, advertising for a job, just ask yourself the question, would someone going through menopause fit with this? Just ask that sensible, what am I trying to say? It's a common sense check. Is this fit for purpose for someone going through menopause? Are we talking about menopause? Maybe around World Menopause Day on the 18th of October, run an event. Tap into, I've got the podcast Women of a Certain Stage, I'm just launching, and also I've got a ton of free resources as well. Plus we've been running Menopause the Basics, which is a free course. It's half an hour a day for 3 days. And we normally run that every 2 months, and it's completely free, no obligation for anything whatsoever. But we've taken 200,000 people through it now, and we recognise the need for it to be on demand. So that's going to be available from April 2025. And people can just go onto the website, Women of a Certain Stage, access that via the website. That'll all be set up. And that just means they can build the knowledge. They can have as many or as little people going through it as they want. And they can start to engage in the conversations in a more meaningful, factual way in the workplace, rather than worrying or wondering about it. Because day one's ages, stages, facts and definitions. Day two is all about how to successfully navigate menopause. And day three is all about why we're talking about menopause at work. So it's a really good starting point for organizations.
Thank you. So you mentioned the coaching program. Is that primarily working one-to-one? I was just thinking, what's the kind of training programs that might be open to organizations? If I apologize if I've missed this in something you've said, but obviously we've got the individuals and then we've got the corporates and the firms. So how do they kind of become more savvy and more useful to their employees that they serve?
So do you mean the menopause coaches that I'm training?
Well, are they presumably working one-to-one with women, or they also work in organizations as well?
They work in so many different ways. So some are, some are working in NGOs, some are working with their local community, some are going to organizations. A lot of people who are running small consultancy businesses like HR, D&I consultancies, they will then be working with their corporate partners or other small businesses. We've then got our people like personal trainers or our therapists will be blending the work that their day-to-day work with what they're learning on the program. And then we've got, for example, one of our Macmillan nurse graduates. She works in the north of England and has set up a whole new chain of menopause clinics through Macmillan and with the NHS. And there are now multidisciplinary teams that are being created to support people going through menopause, with coaching being brought in, especially where they've got people who are not being recommended to take hormone replacement therapy. So, people are using this in lots of different ways. And that's why it's just, for me, it's fascinating, because we get so many different people with so many different backgrounds coming to learn this work. And then they're taking it back and blending it in. So some one-to-one, some one-to-many, and some don't even use it as a coaching program. They deliver each of the weeks of the coaching program as a workshop. So they might do a workshop on mindset or hydration or nutrition or whatever the other topics.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Do you have any men working as coaches?
Yep, we do.
What's the kind of, and what kind of numbers are we talking about? I'm just curious, because obviously this is essentially a female condition. I just wondered how women going through this feel about working with men, and I just wonder whether that's ever been an issue or a barrier.
I think it comes down to the individual rather than the gender.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it very much comes down to what someone's personality, their nature, their empathy, their style. I think all of those things play a role in whether someone's comfortable talking to someone else about this topic rather than what gender they are. So if you've got a very empathic boss who is genuinely taking interest in your well-being and welfare, you're much more likely to open up to them regardless of their gender. So we've had a couple of male personal trainers come through. We had a male come through from financial services, and he works with couples, because we see a lot of breakdown in marriage and relationships. About 2/3 of people blame their divorce on menopause. And so he works with couples over the course of a year. So he takes a 7-week program, and he's built more factors into that because his relationship nearly broke down when his wife was going through menopause. And he saw that both of them would have left their jobs, the family would have broken up, the house would have had to be sold. And he saw how much that would have cost them in more than just financial terms. And so he now works with couples to support them, to make sure that that is a transition they work together on, and they go on that pathway together, and they're looking to do the right thing. So percentage-wise, it's small. It's about 3%, but we do have men come on the course as well.
Fantastic, thank you. Obviously, you're doing lots of good work and your reach is extending, but do we need to do something bigger than what you do to kind of reach society as a general with this interesting challenge? And how will we do it?
Well, I think the greatest thing that happened in September 2024, which is when medical schools put women's health on the map and included menopause as a mandatory component. I think that is probably the number one thing that had to happen. And that means that our GPs coming out in 2030 something will finally have had mandatory training on menopause, which they don't all do at the moment, which is incredibly frustrating for people going to the GP and speaking to someone who's fobbing them off or putting them on antidepressants. So that's the number one. Number two was getting menopause on the schools platform, which happened in 2019. But because of the pandemic, it's taken a couple of years to come through, but that's happened. And then the third thing really, I think, is for employers to make sure that they have got, mandatory guidance or policies in place that they follow through on. So it's the culture change and the culture shift. So I think when you've got those three things together, so getting all our medics trained, getting our nurses trained as well, that would be amazing.
I have to say, I'm absolutely staggered as a doctor myself that menopause doesn't feature in the medical curriculum or hasn't done. I'm absolutely staggered. But it is what it is. I mean, it's amazing. You can spend 5 or 6 years at medical school and there's no room for something as critical as that. But hopefully things are changing on that front.
Yeah.
So how do you envisage the future of workplace policies concerning menopause and women's health? Obviously, you've made great strides coming to where you are right now, but where are we going forward with this?
Yeah, I think in the UK, so if we talk about the UK, going back to 2014 when I started doing this work, nobody had a menopause policy. Certainly, I couldn't find anybody with one. So within 2 or 3 years of that, by about 2015, 16, about 5% on the surveys that were being done had something in place. At least we're talking about it. Fast forward to 2024, and we reckon there's somewhere in the region of 30 to 40% of companies now have a policy or guidance. So things are moving, not fast enough, not quick enough, and not enough, but organizations have got a lot to contend with and a lot to do, and many, many topics that they have to consider. But if we just start getting organizations to think about, menstrual health, fertility, and then menopause, and just have that as a core component of everything to do with people who are assigned female at birth, then that would be one of the biggest steps forward. So it's happening. It's slow. I don't know what we do to speed it up. We lobby Parliament. We speak out in the press. Speak out on stage, and I'm doing everything I possibly can. But there's many, many, many other people out there now doing this work. So when I first started, I didn't know anyone else that did, but now I can, name many, many people that are doing this work. So there's a lot to be done, and there's a lot of people out there doing it in many different ways.
Amazing. Tell us a little about the podcast. What sort of things are you covering? Just give us a bit of a flavour of the podcast. And is this open access?
Yeah, it's open access. So I'm smiling because there are so many podcasts on menopause out there now. And the temptation is always to get every expert that's ever done anything on menopause and have a chat with them and talk to them. And I thought, you know what, there's enough out there of people doing that. There's enough out there. I'm graduating some of the most interesting, fascinating people off of the Menopause Coach program. And they come with such an incredible variety of backgrounds and depth of knowledge and experience. So I thought, you know what? All the experts that deliver training on the program, the doctors, the nurses, the other experts that we have from lifestyle side of things and the functional health side of things, we're going to interview them. We're going to interview our grads, and then we have multiple new experts that are coming out. So we do a lot with pelvic health, sexual health and pleasure. We look at divorce coaching, confidence. We look at many, many, many different topics. So we've already got the first 52 mapped out, and that's just with grads and experts on the Menopause Coach program. And I think the idea behind that is to say that it doesn't matter who you are. Menopause is going to touch your life, and these are the things that you can do about it. And how by becoming menopause savvy and menopause supportive, you can literally transform your own and other people's lives. And that's the core purpose behind it. I'm sure it'll evolve.
Thank you. So what's next for you in terms of the organization, your work, your initiatives? Is there anything you can tell us about that's sort of upcoming, or where are we going from here?
Well, I think I'm always putting out one-off events just to capture as many people as possible and, share everything I'm learning, because there are new papers coming out all the time. We run a massive library, so all my clients have access to that library, so they're always up to date and we're keeping them current. So I'm always running events on that. And the other thing for me is that, having been working in this space now for 11 years, I realized that the biggest impact I can have is by sharing my knowledge. So my goal is to train 20,000 menopause coaches before I retire or die. That's my goal. That's what I'm on a mission to do.
Impressive. How far are you along that path at the moment?
I've got 19,000. I've got 19,000 and something to go.
Okay,
so
brilliant.
I've got a journey.
Lauren, tell us how people can get hold of you if they're listening and want to find out more, want to listen to your podcast, want to get in touch, want to find one of your coaches.
Amazing. So the website, womenofacertainstage.com, or the podcast of the same name. And to get hold of me personally, then the best place is probably through LinkedIn. So just check out Lauren Chiren on LinkedIn and use the messages there. That's my go-to for catching up with people.
Lauren, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. Really appreciate it. Lots of interesting nuggets, really amazing work that you're doing, spreading the word, getting people trained to help this problem be solved by many women, and the outreach is amazing. So thank you so much for your time this afternoon, and as I say, we've given the details for people to get in touch if they need to, but thank you very much again.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Okay, just